All right, my name is James Carey. This is the first video, I guess, supplemental to the Left is Dead podcast with myself and my co-host, Jake Anderson. We just decided to do a little pop-in tonight and talk about some of the insanity in the news lately. So I guess we should start where everybody's eyes are, which is the election. So why don't we go over, well, let's start with like the craziest things happening. Today we had Michael Flynn, right? So what's your thought? What are your thoughts on Flynn and what he did in the first place? Real quick.
Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that Trump is pardoning him, especially given that Flynn is definitely going to be one of the torchbearers of the MAGA movement. So that's not surprising at all. However, as far as his original crime, I think it's pretty well established that he did commit perjury and whatnot. The argument is that there was no underlying crime to begin with, but that's not established. And furthermore, that's not important when establishing a crime. I think Michael Flynn is a criminal. I think, and I also think he is fascistic in nature, and I think he's a dangerous person.
Well, he's a
If
QAnon guy.
he's a QAnon guy, and for no
Full
other
blown.
reason that I think he is one of these people that is like I said, I think he's going to carry the torch of the MAGA movement. He's tweeted QAnon hashtags before. He's clearly a part of the movement. He's
He
one
took
of the
the oath,
he took that
the
fucking
digital
oath.
soldier oath.
I, Jack Flynn,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support and defend
the
Constitution of the United States
Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental
or
reservation
purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the office on which I am about to enter.
of the office of which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Where we go one, we go all.
Where we go one, we go
God
all.
bless America.
God bless America.
And yeah, he's a digital soldier, and I think he is a radicalizing figure. And it doesn't surprise me that he was pardoned, but yeah, it's problematic in my opinion.
Yeah, he really, even over the last few years, he's been mostly embedded with the Q crowd, but even the normal MAGA people still seem to like really love him. And like the alt-right people still love him, like Cernovich and stuff like that. You know, he went out and hucked that bullshit garbage book, what Guerrilla Mindset for Cernovich when that came out. I thought he was funny in 2016 when it came out that like he had a plan to kidnap Fethullah Gulen and return him to Turkey with his son. But as far as like going into the, you know, speaking to the Russians during the transition or whatever, I feel that was a pretty normal operation for any president, you know, with any cabinet member would have done that, I think. And I'm sure it's happened before. And yeah, I guess you got him. He did commit perjury. That is a crime. But also, how often do people lie to the FBI, especially like federal officials?
Probably a lot, but if you get caught doing it and they prosecute you and you're charged and you're sentenced, you should probably do the time.
Did he do any jail time?
He was sentenced. I don't know how much time. I don't know how much, if any, time he did. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not. I don't really give that much of a shit about Michael Flynn, insofar as he is connected with the Q movement, and it's so ironic to me that this fringe movement that I became obsessed with a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my friends thought I was being facetious, or thought maybe I was finding some pet project to obsess over that wasn't that important. It turns out this Q movement is very much intertwined with MAGA. And in fact, maybe one of the most important parts of MAGA, and will probably be the final remnants of MAGA, possibly decades from now. I mean, these people are not going to go away. But I mean, we can get more into the QAnon stuff.
Well,
but
no.
I can't view Flynn in any other context except for that.
Let's touch on it a bit here, because I want to say you're right. A lot of people seem to think that after Pizzagate, right, after the shooting at Comet Ping Pong and stuff like that, this was gone. You know, it wasn't an issue. And then Q popped up, and like, yeah, it was 4chan and then 8chan and then, you know, the dark web. They had to go to 8kun. But the thing about it is it's not those people specifically, but how far it spread into mainstream culture, especially like the Wayfair scandal, the Save Our Children stuff, and everything like that, to a point that now you're seeing the Q people actually accuse Tucker of being like a globalist pedophile. You know, and I think we've talked about this on our episodes, but that's the new party. It's the anti-pedophile demon worshiper party. And then there's two other right-wing parties. There's the Democrats and there's the Republicans.
Right.
And
yeah.
the GOP
we literally don't have an actual left-wing party in America.
No. And the GOP wants to detach from these Q people. That's why they're hanging Trump out to dry. But where do they go? Because like you said, they're not going away. They're the ones still giving money to Trump now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think moving forward, I mean, I don't think that there's going to be almost any differentiation between MAGA and QAnon. I mean, I think they're, like I said, I think they're going to be the final remnant. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What was your question again?
I don't even remember, but no, I think I think that
Sorry.
You're seeing, well, I don't know where this split goes. You know what I mean? Because they don't have an actual like MAGA party. It's still, they're Republicans still, but you're right. All the conspiracies that even like more normie MAGA people believe are like based in some QAnon lore to some extent a lot of the time. So, I mean, the Republican parties,
to me, that's the biggest irony of, for example, even though I do have some a little bit of residual respect for some aspects of the Lincoln Project, not much. I mostly hate them. No. Trust me, I don't like them. But the main reason I don't like them is because they are the progenitors of most of this ideology. For example, Steve Schmidt, who was, pushing, was one of the major Bush figures, and he's literally the person who is responsible for John McCain picking Sarah McCallum as the vice presidential candidate. I mean, like that was his legacy. But now he's anti-Trump. But there's an irony in that. Look, I think there's an ideological evolution that goes on. And we've been seeing this now. The conservative movement has been, essentially birthing these ideas, these xenophobic ideas for decades. And there is an evolution to them. And Trump was at the tail end of that evolution. So to me, it's incredibly ironic that you have establishment Republican blowback to it when they're the ones who created this monster in the first place. And to a certain extent, like you said, the Democratic Party is essentially a center-right party. So in many ways, they're part of it too. And so we don't really have an oppositional party in this country, or at least an oppositional party with power. We do not have any kind of powerful blowback to these parties right now. And to me, that's why, we're doing this podcast, is because the left is dead in this country. At least we do not have a strong left-wing movement in this country. Bernie Sanders is the only reason why people even fucking know what true left-wing politics is in this country.
Yeah, that's the issue. Is it seems as if that was our off ramp. And there's no real working class organizing. The unions aren't what they were. Some of them have gotten more militant, especially public sector ones. But we're seeing a lot of, there is a lack of like this left-wing movement. And obviously Biden has frozen any like left-wing people out of his cabinet. It's all defense contractors.
Well, it's not over yet. He's still naming people, but yeah, the early indications are that he is going to go for the neoliberal establishment that was established under Obama. And yeah, it's problematic. But here's the thing: it's possible for some of these people to be blocked, and particularly if, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, dude. But it's a grim situation right now. I mean, but it'd be a lot more grim. It could be more grim. So I don't know what else to say about that.
I think, that's probably, let's
I think we got a little off topic.
No, let's go into, it kind of does flow into our next topic, because I'm going to have us get into the election next about, the latest recounts and everything like that. Going from the QAnon shit, it's where Q is at right now, obviously, is only concerning themselves with electoral politics, right? They've suddenly become an electoral movement despite claiming not to be for a long time. Where are we at right now? Well, let's start with, I guess, Pennsylvania.
Right. Well, that's we should actually end with Pennsylvania, because
start where you want then.
Pennsylvania is actually new in the news today. But well, essentially where we are with I mean, with any reasonable assessment of the election, it's over. The states are certifying, all of the critical states are certifying, and Biden is going to win handily.
Federal judges Trump appointed are knocking down these cases.
Yeah, no, Federalist Society judges are knocking down these things, and they're doing it with prejudice. Which means when they throw them out with prejudice, that means the cases are so weak that they don't even want these cases to be able to be relitigated. They're literally throwing them out.
Yeah, they won't hear
and
them
that
again.
and that's what's happening right now. And it's over. But obviously, as we've been over many times, there is this kind of alternate universe conspiratorial world in the QAnon world where they believe that, I mean, in many ways, it's hard to assess this without discussing psychology, because there is definitely some major delusional pathological elements going on with this. But a lot of these QAnon people think that it's not over yet. They think that
California's red, my friend.
They think that Trump, they think this was part of the plan, essentially.
Yeah, it was the setup.
They talk about a plan, and they view this as basically almost like a setup, that Trump set them up to steal the election so that he could catch them in fraud.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's really a sting operation, contrary to what everybody else said. Trump knew this was happening. Eric knew this was happening and warned the public. I knew this was happening. However, I could not say anything about it. What happened was we watermarked every ballot with what's called the QFS blockchain encryption code. In other words, we know pretty well where every ballot is, where it went, and who has it. So this is not a stolen election. On the contrary, we reversed the entire game of war along the lines of Sun Tzu, the art of war.
It's like Sun Tzu says. A good commander is benevolent and unconcerned with fame.
What?
Sun Tzu, the Chinese Prince Machiavelli. Tony turned me on to him. Tzu. Sun Tzu, you fucking ass kid.
So you have an account called Art of War that says it shows a meme of William Barr, or Bill Barr, BB.
Bill Burr.
And he says the reason you're not seeing BB is because he's behind the scenes directing the prosecution of the deep state. I guarantee you, watch what happens. He's reviewing the evidence that the US military has collected of massive voter fraud. This was a retweet of a major QAnon figure named Major Patriot. And probably one of the saddest ones. Well, I'll get back to Terrence K. Williams, but yeah, it's hard to even know where to start with some of these retweets. I look at them every day, and it gets harder and harder to parse it's getting harder to parse what is a grift and what is a genuine sentiment. It's getting harder to see like who is grifting and who is actually just having like a slow moving meltdown. But one of the major QAnon figures was someone named Joe
M.
yeah, Joe M, right.
Yeah.
Now he was kicked off of Twitter. He changed his name a bunch of times.
Right.
Now he's just on Parler, right?
Right. I know he always deactivated and stuff when bans were coming and shit like that too, you know.
Right. He's probably one of the biggest, most influential, at least certainly one of the most militant Q people. So he posted on Parler recently, "Friends, we've spent a long time waiting for a storm. For 4 years, we heard the approaching thunder and saw flashes across the night sky, but it was always further away than we anticipated. This time, there is a deadline. Inauguration dates are not subjective. Predictions that could be wrong. The world is about to be rocked when it discovers patriots never had any intention of handing our country over to traitors and foreign enemies. When the fake news panic starting to set in as they realize this is happening for real, and with there being zero doubt in victory, patriots always knew was coming. Now really is the time to buckle your seatbelt and get ready to see the liberal meltdown of the century. Tick tock."
Can I say something? I gotta say, this is the stupidest shit I have ever heard. Because let me tell you, the fact that these people now, like I said, they've like turned on Tucker, for Christ's sake. They're out there saying like, Bibi and Israel are behind a coup. You know, like these are people. Bibi, who Trump like goes over and kisses every 6 months, is suddenly behind a deep state coup to take him out. You know, that's insanity to me.
Dude, Sidney Powell, do you know, okay, so Sidney Powell is like the resident insane lawyer who is basically a QAnon person, who is basically the new QAnon hero. Like basically everyone in the QAnon world is now absolutely obsessed with Sidney Powell, who is a woman who is basically a lawyer who is representing Trump and has actually been dispossessed by Trump and the campaign.
The world is watching this. I have gotten multiple emails from people in other countries who watch the same pattern happen there. We have witnessed testimony that the same things were done in those countries as this was exported from Venezuela and by Maduro and by Mr. Chavez and by Cuba. And of course, we know China also has a substantial presence in Venezuela and substantial interest in making sure that President Trump does not continue in office. This is the consummate foreign interference in our election in the most criminal way you can possibly imagine. It must be shut down. We know, for example, that one of the Dominion's highest level employees or officers went to Detroit himself to man the Detroit Operations Center, where he could watch the votes coming in real time and decide what file folder in the system to put those votes into. That's why you see massive spikes after hours when people were told that all the votes were in and all the votes were counted. Many Dominion employees have already reached out to us to tell us the truth. They are Americans who want to ensure election integrity like we do. I would encourage every Dominion or Smartmatic employee who is fed up with the corruption in this country to come forward as soon as possible. because these are serious federal offenses that I am confident the Department of Justice will be in pursuit of in very short order if they are not already.
All right, so Sidney Powell is the new QAnon hero, essentially. And she is the one who infamously said she's going to release the Kraken. And that's like one of the newest QAnon hashtags, is release the Kraken. And essentially what this is the newest incarnation of the declass movement, which is, they always think that Trump is about to declassify all of the information that's going to finally criminalize the deep state. They've been talking about it for 4 years. It's never happened. And now that he's lost the election, now some random lawyer is going to come in and release the Kraken. And this is when everything is going to be declassified, right?
I'm pretty
Now,
sure it's already
the
a crime to be a pedophile and child murderer.
Trump's campaign, including Giuliani.
Yeah.
Imagine Giuliani dispossessing someone. Giuliani just alienated Sidney Powell from the movement. And the reason is because Sidney Powell gave this press conference where she literally was claiming that not only was Hugo Chavez responsible for creating the software that rigged the election, but that the Republican governor, Kemp, in Georgia, took a bribe from the deep state to throw this election. So it got so crazy. Like, that's when you know a narrative has gone off the rails, is when both Trump and Giuliani can't deal with the craziness of the theory anymore.
Well, the funny thing is that that's a result of their own just dumbass antics. Because look at the fact that Trump has Rudy Giuliani defending him in the first place shows that, like, oh yeah, dude, you have no friends, you fucking loser. You know, there's nobody left because you got this old man who shits himself, his fucking hair dye's bleeding out, his fucking teeth are all fucked up. He just starts screaming into cameras and shit. And you have this asshole. And this is like, compare that to the Bush legal team in 2000.
Yeah.
They were killers.
Right.
And now you have Rudy, who people had a fond image of from like 9/11 because you remember him on America's Mayor on TV at Ground Zero, right? You know, that was what we thought of him as all through the Bush years. But now he's out there and you see like what like a scumbag he is. And you realize like, oh, dude, this guy's like a loyalist to Trump because he's a loser. He has nowhere else to go, which is that's the same for a lot of people who are still like sticking by Trump.
Sure.
Most people are sending out resumes.
Right. No, these are people. Bill Barr essentially got his job because he essentially wrote a legal argument a few years ago about how he believed Watergate was not justified, or he believed Watergate was okay, essentially, and essentially justifying ultimate executive power. And so that's how people at that level, that's how they audition for jobs. They write position papers.
That was Nixon's argument in itself, though.
Sure.
Nixon said,
well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. By definition. Exactly.
Look, these are extreme right-wing criminals that we're talking about. Rudolph Giuliani is straight up insane. I mean, he is, I mean, he's off the rails, I think, in terms of just personally his mind, but he is also just a feverish mind.
He's another tragedy of 9/11. If there was no 9/11, he'd be remembered as the mayor who appeared on Seinfeld.
Well, he was an ultimate grifter when it comes to 9/11. I mean, he didn't do anything for New York. He just cashed in on that ideological, emotional cash that was presented to him at that time. Right. Yeah. No, he's the ultimate grifter, and it makes total sense that he would acclimate himself to the greatest grifter in American political history, which is Trump. I mean, Trump is the greatest con man in history. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Oh, the fact that he's still fundraising millions of dollars after losing an election.
Right.
And he's not doing anything with it except for paying Rudy Giuliani.
No, he's going to be paying off the $300 million he owes
No, he
banks.
can't. It's all campaign funds. Like he can't do anything with it
Oh,
except pay his friends.
I'm sure he'll figure out a way to diverge those funds. But yeah, look, I mean, look, we're talking about, there's almost no way. I mean, I think it's going to take decades to parse out the ultimate criminality that was going on during this time. And look, are they the first corrupt administration in history? Absolutely not. I think every administration has been a part of war crimes. Don't think for a second that we're sitting here saying that Trump is the first corrupt president in history, but I think he is the most abjectly obvious about it that we could possibly imagine. I can't imagine a more obvious example of corruption in the presidency than Trump. And frankly, I'm glad was voted out. I think it's I'm worried about what Biden is going to do. I am, but I'm not going to lie. I'm relieved that Trump is going to be leaving office.
I tend to think Biden is more corrupt than Trump, but that's just a topic for another day. But at the same time, now that like the Trump campaign has disavowed the lunatic theories, right? They're still moving to do things like recounts. And let's start with my state, since you didn't want to start with Pennsylvania. Let's start with Michigan.
Oh yeah, I was going to end with, well, we'll come back to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, let's start with my state then. So in my state, obviously the first controversy broke out when the certifiers in Wayne County, a county that's never gone red, you know, it's the county that Detroit is in. It never goes red. But these election certifiers in Wayne County refused to certify the results. They said dead people were voting, which I don't think the Democrats are clever enough to do at this point. But
I mean, it's just a stupid, lazy argument.
I think they were just Trump people who were pissed about losing, to be honest with you. I don't doubt that, you know, I think
there's simply no evidence that dead people's votes are being counted. There's just no evidence for it.
So yeah,
look, if you want to present evidence for something, that's fine. But I'm tired as a person who aspires to be a journalist. I'm tired of arguments that are presented without evidence. It's tiresome.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like here they've tried, you know, those election certifiers have become a part of the Q conspiracy too. But now we're trying to we're holding hearings here in the state, you know, the state capitol to try and debate Trump's basis for claiming there was fraud. And apparently, you know, they don't see much. So this seems like a lost cause. But the people still insist, obviously, that this was stolen.
Well, the Trump supporters are always going to claim it was stolen. They seem to be ignorant of the fact that half the country is Democrat. But that's okay. Reality is going to be just fine despite their lack of belief in it. Like the universe does not require your belief in it to go on operating, right?
Yeah.
But to circle back around to Pennsylvania before I forget, what's happening in Pennsylvania is Gettysburg. So Gettysburg is Pennsylvania, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm an idiot. I'm just making sure. I was pretty sure it was Pennsylvania, but edit that out. Anyway, Trump and Giuliani, or Trump joined Giuliani today in a presentation to some kind of tribunal in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania today to try and prove voter fraud. It was a Zoom call, apparently. And that's what the QAnon people are all going off about today, is that, oh, this was bombshell evidence. This is going to change everything. And so that's what we're left with here. I mean, really, dude, at this point, it's more of a psychological phenomenon than a political one. But
yeah, and then there's Georgia too, which is now on recount number 3.
Well, and
which-
Georgia is actually the closest state. I mean, Georgia is actually like a legitimate state to challenge. It was Biden only won it by a couple thousand votes. You know,
but what cracks me up the most is that they've hand counted the votes.
right?
Well, first they machine counted the votes. They got the hand recount. And now the third recount puts them back through the same machines that
Right.
made a
I
victory
mean,
for-
how many times are you going to want to see Biden win? I mean,
yeah,
at a
do we
certain
have to have
point, it's like,
another hand recount? Like,
you know, and look, the core argument that they're making is actually something that I researched back at 2004, a long time ago. There's an argument being made, not very eloquently, but that back in 2004, when Carey lost to Bush, and he lost in Ohio, right?
right.
And it was very close, and there was some weird kind of voting anomalies there. At the time, I became very interested in something called fractional voting. There's a site called Black Box Voting, and it's this idea that you can siphon off fractions of votes algorithmically. Okay, it's again not much evidence for it. That's why I ultimately abandoned the theory. But that's what you see a lot of Trump people doing now in less eloquent terms. That, even though that wasn't very eloquent, they're saying that, oh, the machines were rigged to flip votes and whatnot. That the fact of the matter is, like, look, there are people that are hired to look over this stuff. There are people hired to supervise those people. There are people hired to supervise the supervisors. Like, there's a lot of forethought that goes into these elections. And look, you got to have extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. At this point, there is simply no evidence for election fraud. There's none.
Here is the funniest thing is like these machines that are saying, you know, the hammer and scorecard scandal or whatever, this non-existent kind of thing. But the machines that would be vulnerable to that were all in counties that Trump won. So even their argument that these like machines like flipped votes, they're all in places Trump won. If
Right.
Every Pennsylvania district that used the machines that they claim were vulnerable went red. So
Well, also, like,
stupid.
It's stupid we're even talking about this, but they're alleging voter fraud. But they're saying that they flipped the votes against Trump, but not against the senators. You know,
Right. Yeah.
so,
Exactly.
So essentially, there was one aspect of the ballot that they flipped,
They just needed
and
Biden.
Nothing else, right? Yeah.
As
So
soon as all you need
it's-
is Biden, and the 20-year lockdown can commence, and everyone loses their jobs, and nobody can buy anything.
It's just an illogical argument. Honestly, we should move on. We've already spent too much time on that issue.
Let's dive into the actual reality of what's going on behind the scenes real fast. Trump has obviously conceded the election. The Stop the Steal shit is a fundraising campaign. You know?
Sure.
At this point, Trump has started sharing everything he needs to with the Biden transition team. They're starting to do the daily intelligence briefings with Biden. Obviously, behind closed doors, Trump he knows he's not he is an idiot, but he's not like stupid, like that stupid. He knows he lost the election, especially going into.
I don't even think he's an idiot. I just think he's a sociopath.
Yeah. I mean, he's dumb in a certain way. Like he lacks some things like object permanence and stuff, I think. But like, yeah, he's not a total moron. Like, he knows he lost the election, and he's conceding that behind closed doors, you know. So what it's like, reality isn't, you know, it doesn't interlock with what he's saying publicly, because obviously he's still screaming about losing.
Well, no, he's clearly raising money right now. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, a lot of people think that he's essentially placating his base, and that I think you may have even made this point, that basically him and McConnell have made the estimation that to have the best chance of winning the 2 runoff Senate seats in Georgia, they need to have the base mobilized, right? The best way to have the base mobilized is to think that the election was stolen. I mean, I think that really is the most logical analysis of it at this point.
Yeah, and there's definitely no loyalty from like McConnell or anyone like that after that's done, because the Republican Party wants to get rid of Trump. But
oh yeah,
let's get off of him. Let's go into Biden, I guess. What has been? Let's talk about what Biden.
Right. Well, and that's ultimately what we're probably going to be talking about for the next couple of years.
That's going to be
and ultimately, I mean, that's what this podcast is about. Is like, it was always ideal for us to not have to fucking fight against like white nationalist right-wing fascism, but to be able to actually make nuanced arguments against the kind of like faux liberal, like kind of bullshit corporatist system that is infected the country, and actually talk about how we can install left-wing politics, or how we can at least start to talk about left-wing politics in this country.
Well, so Biden has seemed, you argue that he hasn't finished appointing cabinet members, but I think the people he's appointed so far, and he's talking about Republicans in the cabinet.
No, I agree. It's not good. It's not good.
As you even conceded, the people who were behind the Lincoln Project, a lot of them, worked for George W. Bush. They were architects of the Iraq War, and died in the wool neocons. These people are suddenly jumping into the Democratic Party. You had John Kasich and Colin Powell speaking at the convention. The Democratic Party has fully become a neoconservative party as far as foreign policy goes, and they've always agreed on like
it was already that way, man. It was already that way. Like, and this is already the case. Yeah.
And these neoliberal economics, I mean, this was Reagan. This is still the same economic system that was going on under Ronald Reagan. The Democrats have no problem with it. The Republicans have no problem with it.
No, and that point is worth repeating, that the current Democratic economic platform is essentially the same as Reaganomics.
Well, they call themselves neoliberals, which is a Thatcherite term, and that was the mass privatization of public services in the United Kingdom happened during the 1980s. And the same happened here in the 1980s under Reagan. There was this dual, rush to privatization and financialization of the economy that happened in the UK and the US. Those are right-wing ideas that have now become the basis of the Democratic Party. And you see now that like everything has to have, even public good things for public good have to have all these conditions to them. Obamacare was, you have to go on a website and click for hours and find the best plan for you. And now Biden, I mean, the Democrats proposed $50,000 in student debt relief. And then Biden already decided to negotiate himself down, even though he has nobody to negotiate against right now, and lowered it to 10,000 and says like, oh, and you're also going to have to like fill out some forms and, be from like the right zip code. And you have to take like a FAFSA grant for college or something, like these things, like these technicalities, they're just like to make sure the least amount of people receive anything good as they continue to privatize everything else. And it's such
it's frustrating, man.
I see the liberal world, or like the neoliberal, like technocrat world is a horrible, isolated, lonely ass place. That's why we're on webcams right now talking to each other. This is what like this has come to. And it's not even just because of the pandemic. The isolation happens before, when everyone is overworked and you have side gigs like Uber and stuff, or you're driving Uber for 12 hours a day. You have no time for like political education, political organization.
Right.
And you're just isolated and alone. You don't, you have no class consciousness because you can't even interact with members of your class.
Absolutely.
And the Democratic Party is going to kind of perpetuate that, in my opinion. They love privatization.
Right. Well, I mean, you put out a lot on the table there, but like I agree with all of your fundamental points. I mean, I guess the one I'm going to latch onto is that, I think that one of the reasons we don't have good class consciousness in this country is because we're so like desperately working. A lot of people are forced to stay at their jobs to keep their healthcare plans. A lot of people are forced to keep shitty jobs because they're scared of not being able to get other work. And ultimately, that kind of frustration and desperation stops you from being able to really think realistically about mobilization, consolidation, solidarity, things like that.
Anything. I mean,
anything. But I think essentially what, as far as Biden, no, Biden is not going to. I mean, there's still talk that Biden could appoint Bernie Sanders as the labor secretary. I don't really know what real effect that would have. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, I have faith that Bernie to me seems like a lifer. I feel like he has a strategy, and it might not work, but I think he has a strategy that is exportable to the future. So I think the movement that Bernie Sanders has set up is a movement that can be replicated, and we just need a new figure. We're going to need a new figure who, look, the idea that marijuana would be decriminalized and legalized across the country would have been unthinkable in 1999. Okay?
Yeah.
It's here now. That's what's going to happen with healthcare.
Well,
that's what's going to happen, and it's going to happen. And the way these things happen is the corporate world figures out a way to manage it and make a profit out of it. So somehow there's going to be some negotiation where people are going to be like, okay, look, society is going to break down if we don't give people healthcare. So let's figure out a way to make money off of it.
I'll say two things. It already has been adopted, even by disingenuous people like, say, Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris early on in her campaign. They said they supported it. And number two is there is still a way to make money, because nobody's proposing like, oh, we're going to actually appropriate all the hospitals. They'll all be state-run hospitals. Nobody's taking it away. Nobody's taking private doctors' offices away. There's still money to be made. It's not. People act like this is some big like socialist move, but it's
right. I know. No, I know, man.
It still it still feeds into this capitalist system. I mean, insurers won't exist. But that's it.
Right.
Who cares?
Right. Yeah. Big fucking whoop. Yeah.
Honestly, I know, there's obviously people so opposed to government spending, though they don't want to spend a dime on like universal health care. But if you ask them in the next breath, do you hate your insurance company?
Right.
What would they say? Yeah.
Good point. Terrible. Yeah. No, they conservatives. Yeah. Conservatives. Yeah, ask conservatives. Do you like insurance companies? No, fuck those motherfuckers. Right.
They'll blame their health insurance on Obamacare, but they still hate their insurance company.
Right.
So yeah, there's just obviously
But I think I mean like I said, I mean, what do you think about my point in terms of comparing this to marijuana legalization? Because I think I think it's a fairly good comparison. Like,
I think it'll happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen. It may even be a right-wing precedent that does it, to be honest.
Even Tucker Carlson has come out and said we're going to have to do some kind of universal basic income to stop a populist uprising.
There's
Tucker Carlson said that. Tucker Carlson literally gave a monologue about how there's going to be a populist uprising if we don't do some kind of socialist agenda.
Yeah, that's the danger, though, is the nationalists picking up that language.
Right. Yeah, them appropriating that. Yeah.
That's why it's so important for a left-wing movement and a left-wing party and left-wing voices in public, because once the right-wing people who are, say, against wars abroad because they want to bring them home, or, you know, once they start proposing like healthcare and things like that.
Well, what
all
do you
of a
think about
sudden-
AOC, man?
I mean, in terms of what? Like, what
In
her
terms
future
of being,
holds?
no, I mean, in terms of being a spokesman for a transitional stage of socialism. I mean, don't you think she has some political leverage that is worth assessing?
I don't know that she has leverage necessarily, but I think things she's proposing, like the Green New Deal and like Medicare for all, I don't think it's necessarily going to be these people in federal government right now. I think the real rising stars of like any type of working class movement are coming up in local elections in a lot of places. I think that's the thing to watch. I think the real left politicians aren't at the federal level because it's so corrupt once you get to that level that even if you are an ideologue, you're so restricted. So I think people starting out at like a lower level have much more promise. You know, AOC, as much as she had experience like interning for Kennedy and everything, she jumped right into federal office.
Yeah, but federal is where the change happens, man.
But at the same time, change happens at the state level too. My state is still paying out unemployment. Other states, even though they're closed down, they're not.
Right. Okay, state. When you say local, I don't know what you're talking about.
Local,
but yeah.
the same too, though. School boards.
Okay, we're not going to get fucking Medicare for all at the school board
No,
level,
I don't
but
want to dive into it, but I'm just saying this is where like the politicians who are like, they're literally starting out connected to the causes that concern working people the most. And that's where they're starting their political experience from. I don't think the people who have just jumped, I think I like some of the people like in the squad or whatever. I like Omar the most probably.
Mhm.
But I think that the real talent will keep coming from the bottom, because I think as these socialist politicians, you know, make changes in their communities or in their counties or in their states, you're going to see an advancement. You know, they'll build these bases out and they'll go farther. Then they enter federal government. I think it's important that leftists make sure we don't end up like the Green Party, you know, running a presidential candidate every 4 years and then jacking off until the next election. You know, I think it's going to be these people coming from a ground up level who start out with ideas for helping like their local community, and then that grows as their ambition grows. I don't know what you think about that, but sorry, that's a lot.
No. Well said.
All right. Well, I mean, we kind of discussed Biden there. Let's go into what his buddy Obama has been doing, because a lot of people have obviously said a Biden presidency is a third term Obama presidency. But right now, what's amazed me the most about Obama is he's apparently decided to go out and expose the liberal mindset for what it is. Starting with his comments about black voters that he made in an interview, I think in the Atlantic, where he accused, you know, he said, oh, black voters who went for Trump were obsessed with like bling and stuff like that, which is insane. You know, imagine a Republican saying that.
And what is the context of that, really?
He was being asked why Trump managed to get 20% of the black vote, which is fairly large for a Republican president, obviously.
Was that really the national average, 20%?
Yeah, something like that. He did pretty well for a Republican.
All right, I'll take your word for it. That seems pretty high to me.
If I'm wrong, I'll stick something in here with the real number.
Right.
But I swear he did better than they thought he would with black African Americans, black voters, you know, whatever you want to call them, I don't know. And then there was also Hispanics who went for Trump.
Right. Well, this was actually fairly debunked by Juan Gonzalez of Democracy Now! Actually discussed this in depth about this idea that Hispanic, Latina voters went more for Trump than in previous elections. And it's a complicated issue. And you got to look at a lot of different factors. You got to look at where the votes are coming from. In Florida, absolutely.
Well, yeah, but that's what I think was different was like in the border states and stuff was where he got a higher turnout than they would expect for a Republican. I don't obviously, yeah,
Right.
like you said, Florida.
I think the important part is that more Latinas turned out to vote than ever before by a wide margin, and the vast majority of them voted Democratic. If we want to focus on the demographics and communities that voted for Trump, we can, but I'm not sure that's an accurate representation of the Latina community.
No, I don't. But the fact that the vote share is growing should be a problem for the Democrats. They should be the Democrats.
Well, they need to reach out better to those communities.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Absolutely.
saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not crazy to think that more, as trends go, and like I said, as people like Tucker say, you need things like a UBI. It's not crazy to think that, hey, maybe more black voters go. A lot of them are socially conservative, just like a lot of everyone here is socially conservative. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And if the Democrats have nothing to offer you but like charter school coupons and driving Uber 14 hours a day, and then like being paid at night to have, Facebook put a sleep monitor on your head, like if that's the liberal ideal and like the conservative party's proposing something like, oh, a UBI, you can lose more of these voters.
Well, that's not what's happening right now, though.
Not right now. I know not right now. But my concern is the Democrats have promised nothing.
Right. And to me, it's
But I mean, let's go into our disagreements here.
No, it's baffling. No, I don't know what disagreement we have here. I don't think we have disagreements on the cataclysmic failure of the Democratic Party to represent leftist ideals. I don't think we have a disagreement there.
Yeah, I just don't know that. I don't know. I don't know what we should do next.
I mean, there's never going to be a communist party that's going to control America, bro. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, is that what you're expecting to happen?
Not in my lifetime, no.
Yeah, no, not in any. No, I mean, yes, maybe. I mean, maybe in the future, but like right now,
I don't
dude, we have 60. We have 30% of the country is so disillusioned they don't even vote. Another 70 million people are straight up endorsing a white nationalist.
Yeah, if there's socialism here, it'll be multiple generations out.
Yeah.
And it will be when like a third of the country's underwater and California's finally in the ocean.
Right. So we're talking we're talking about the future here.
Yeah.
When we talk about these things, it's important to recognize that we're talking about the future because we are so cataclysmically lost right now. It is not even funny.
And as you said, there's no left, really. And I'll admit, like the Marxist movement in the United States is very weak. It's obviously very splintered, just like the right wing is, and all the Nazis are very splintered. We do the same thing, and I'll admit that. I'm sure some of the jokes I made have gotten me canceled already on this show.
That's a grim comparison, dude, because you're right on the issues.
But that's the thing.
As opposed to Nazis who are like diametrically wrong on every issue, man. I mean, it's
over other. I mean, the arguments on the left, for me, these are arguments about things that are just as terrible as what the Nazis want to do. When there's a leftist party who wants to intervene in Syria, That's just
That's not the same
it,
as Nazis.
it
Dude.
is. It
No,
is.
it's not.
When you're dropping thousands of bombs on a country, houses, and killing
That's not
killing
that's
hundreds
not
of thousands
that's
of
not
civilians.
genocide, dude. That's war crimes. It's
Yeah,
not
okay, how about
genocide.
Yemen then? How about Yemen? A U.S.-backed blockade by the liberals and the conservatives.
Dude,
That's
it's
they're murdering an
it's
entire
more
country.
it's murder. It's murder. It's mass murder. Absolutely. It's not genocide though.
So if no, that is a genocide. I don't
Now,
care if
genocide
there's
is
no
when you
paper to plan it out.
Now, genocide is when you purposely focus on a specific ethnic group and eliminate them, man. That's literally the definition of genocide, dude.
Yeah, the Yemenis. And the U.S. is helping. There's cholera outbreaks and no aid can get in. Come on.
But it's more. But it's a geopolitical strategy. It's not about ethno. It's not the same as Hitler like wiping out people because they're Jewish or because they're gypsies. I'm not saying it's not bad, man. Dude, come on. Can we at least agree on this? It's bad. I'm just saying it's simply not genocide, man.
I'm saying that yes, the Nazis are terrible. Obviously, I don't agree with anything they're promoting. I'm not on their side.
I know. I didn't think I wasn't confused on that.
No, I know you're not. I'm just making this clear for anybody if anyone has the soul to watch this far into this video. But I want to say that the thing is, when I have a splinter with somebody on the left, it's over something that's just as vital. Maybe you don't feel it here. But if I disagree with somebody on the left about, say, the existence of Israel, a state that was illegally established by the imperial powers, millions thrown out into the diaspora all over, from the Middle East to here, tossed out, and then the settlements in the West Bank, the absolute blockade of Gaza and starvation of the Palestinian people, and the persecution of Palestinians inside Israel, including laws that make it so it's clear that Jewish Israelis are above Palestinian Israelis.
Yeah, I would argue what Israelis are doing against Palestinians is a form of genocide.
So if a leftist disagrees with me on that, that is just as much of a split for me as arguing with an actual fascist. I see them as these are equally brutal things.
Yeah, but dude, you can't just say everything is genocide just because it's a war crime. There are differentiations in war crimes, okay?
I won't say everything is genocide. I didn't call Syria a genocide. I called that a war crime.
You actually did.
I don't think I did.
You sort of started to say that, but whatever. Yeah, that's you got worked up about me saying that it wasn't genocide, even though I admitted it was a war crime.
I think I said it. I said it's not genocide, but the effects of dropping tens of thousands of bombs equate to the same amount of casualties as if the Nazis got their way. What the U.S. does, and when leftists agree,
is that true though? How many? I mean, look. I hate to sit here and count bodies, but I hate to sit here and count bodies, but I mean, how many people have died? A lot of people have died, dude. Horrible war crimes. I'm not disagreeing with you, but how many people have died in the war on terror?
Millions.
Okay, well, probably not 6 to 10 million. But I'm just saying, and it happened over the course. Just listen, it happened over the course of 20 years, and not just a few years. That's a different kind of slaughter. That's all I'm arguing, dude. I'm just saying I don't think it's helpful to your cause or your argument to compare modern day war crimes to the Holocaust. I don't think that helps you.
I'm not comparing it to the Holocaust.
You literally did.
That
was the first thing you said. That was literally the first thing you did.
I don't know. Look,
we can move on.
I don't know. No, I don't. Fine. You have the war on terror. It took 20 years, right? But this thing this imperial machine has been raging for 200 years. It's gone all over the world and caused mass death.
Sure.
You want to rack up the bodies of capitalism, and think of like the British Empire and things like entities like that. The Spanish.
Well, look, I agree with you, dude. And
let me just finish.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Think of these entities like that. The brutality that the British Empire did across the globe, and they did do genocides. They did target, certain communities and countries they occupied. So the British Empire has done terrible crimes, including like even the Irish famine, was a lot of that was caused by the British government. So these things have been done by these countries, these liberal democracies, and I just don't see myself on even ground with somebody who will like defend these countries and these entities' right to exist. Because I think what they have done, whether it's not a genocide, fine, but that chaos,
right? That's all I was. That's all I was arguing, dude.
Fine, but the chaos and bloodshed they've caused for the same Anglo supremacy, whether it was the U.S. or the U.K., is just as bad as what the Nazis would like to do. The Nazis just want to bring the imperialism home. They want us to feel it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Jim, I was listening to I listened to, I told you this the other day, I listen to conservative radio when I drive, just because I want to piss myself off.
I get the Gorka show here for some reason.
Like Lars Larson and just this random conservative people. And I was listening, I think it was Lars Larson, but I wanted so badly you to hear what he was saying. Because he went on a rampage and he was saying that leftism has caused more mass murder than any ideology. He was basically arguing that leftism has caused billions of murders in history. And so this is an argument you commonly hear related to communism. Now, and you commonly hear people conflate, to now backtrack to what I was saying before about genocide, you hear people conflate Nazi fascism and the murder it invoked to the deaths that fell under communism. Now,
the beautiful horseshoe.
Right, and quite frankly, I would love to hear you talk about this, because I don't believe that, but it's something I hear so frequently that it drives me fucking crazy, frankly. What is the difference? I mean, I know that there is a difference, obviously, as the point I was just making, in economic mistakes that cause people to die, right?
Right.
But and straight up genocide. But for you, and I'm not against you on this, I'm actually with you on this, but to someone who would argue that communism has caused just as many deaths as Nazism, what would you argue in response to that?
Well, there's a lot of different examples people use, so it depends on what you want to discuss. I mean, let's talk about some.
Well, like Mao, Stalin, Mao and Stalin. Let's start with Mao and Stalin.
But let's like really break down some of like the big accusations against Stalin, right?
Okay.
The famine in the Ukraine, that's obviously a big one that comes up a lot now, and as far as like the Turning Point USA victims of communism crowd. But I mean, the famines that happen, you have to understand that Stalin was implementing a very radical system of collectivizing farms. And I mean, central planning can never be perfect. And obviously there's huge flaws with it, especially back then. But, and there's also a lot of influence that, after the Russian Revolution, there were Western-backed saboteurs inside the country. There was money flowing to royalists and fascists and any type of, anti-Soviet force they could get money to, there was a lot of sabotage, and there was a lot of, misinformation. And there's a lot of misinformation about death tolls as far as I'm concerned too, but that's a whole nother thing to get into.
Yeah.
And then another argument is, say, World War II. There was a lot, the Stalinist purges, I'm going to brush right over because those, blown out of proportion, in my opinion. I don't think I'm sorry, but the birth rate was going up between World War I and World War II. Stalin was not murdering millions of people. People did go to prison. Generals did get arrested. Former members of the party went to gulags. It happened. Yes, I'll admit that. But I also defend that, which we'll get into in a bit here. So
let's get into it now. Like, well, how do you defend Stalinist? What do you mean you defend it? What do you mean you defend gulags?
I mean, I defend. Maybe we could talk about humane prison conditions today, but
sure.
I defend the purging of anti-revolutionary elements in the society.
Okay.
I defend that idea as it is. Because what, we've talked about this before. What's always bothered me about like the anarchist idea is, well, we just end this and the reactionaries live in this system with us now. And
right.
The capitalists live in this system now. And the liberals live in this system with us.
Well, that's why anarchism can never work right now.
Right. But and I mean, if you want, communism is supposed to be a transition. That's what even Marx describes it as. This is a transition to a stateless society. But as long as the elements of reaction exist, and that includes internally, but think in the case of the Soviet Union, the entire Cold War was based around the West targeting them in and attempting to topple the government. You have the whole industrialized world with their guns pointed at you. You have to take measures to make sure those elements don't infiltrate your country and or come at you from the outside. You have to do things like mass industrialization to make sure you can defend yourself. And people will say, well, yeah, people died in the gulags, and like during World War II, when they moved the factories from southern Russia up into Siberia to keep them out of the Germans' reach, like a lot of people died in that time. But you have to understand that the Soviet Union industrialized over such a short period, between not even World War I, really not until like the late 20s, early 30s, when the industrialization started and continued as they were being invaded by the Nazis. And yes, there was a lot of death in that, but look at how much was accomplished in that span of time. Now, if you look at American industrialization starting in like, say, the late 1800s until, say, the fall of the Soviet Union, I would say there was more deaths involved in that, especially with the global trading system we've set up, than there was in like the mass rapid industrialization of the Soviet Union. And again, I feel the Soviet Union had to do those things because it was necessary. Like, as I said, when the whole world is pointing at you, you have to be ready.
Right. No, I mean, and it's a tough issue to completely explain. But yeah, I mean, it's an issue that persists. I mean, it's an argument that persists among the right. The right points to some of the failures of communist governments, and it's frustrating because we're living through the failures of the current capitalist
you nailed it.
Systems. Yeah.
You nailed it. That's the thing. Here's what I want to say. At the same time, I'll admit Mao made some errors in his policy that led to famines in China, But at the same time, the British government did things like intentionally starve people in India and in Ireland, that's not ever talked about. The victims of capitalism, they don't get a memorial in Washington, D.C., you know. It's the death cause is typically higher by capitalism, in my opinion, in most cases. And it's done intentionally by the chase of the profit motive. And we see it right now. Look at the response to COVID. Look at the United States capitalist powerhouse. Look at the response to COVID-19.
Right.
And we
the greatest country in the world has the highest deaths.
Yeah, we talked about that on our last episode. Compared the US to China in their response.
Right.
You know, as far as the planned economy, even if you won't admit China is communist or socialist or anything, the planned economy clearly stepped in and did what it had to do.
Right. Which in my opinion is the purpose of a government.
Yeah.
Like what we're going through right now is like, that's what a government is for.
Yeah.
Is to step in and manage this kind of shit.
Absolutely. And the fact that like this country didn't even have PPE reserves, let alone reserves of like staple foods.
We didn't have shit because of Trump. We didn't have shit.
And
we didn't even acknowledge that it was real.
Even beyond Trump, look at like, you remember the videos of dairy farmers pouring milk down the drain, right? And they were like, oh, well, this is milk meant for like cafeterias and institutions. And like, so they just have to dump it because those places are closed right now. And it's like, dude, a planned economy would reroute those resources to the store where I was going to, where it says, hey, limit 1 milk per customer.
Right.
You don't dump it down the drain.
Right.
That's insanity.
Well, so what do you think about like as we move into the future? It's 2020, automation is increasing, artificial intelligence is increasing. I mean, do you think that artificial intelligence and automation are going to ultimately inform a better socialist regime? I mean, look, it's all about look, I talked to my dad about this. Just let me finish this point real quick. I talked to my father about this. My father is 77. He fought in Vietnam. He's a liberal. He's pretty fucking practical. I fucking love him to death. But he basically told me, one of the last times I talked to him recently, he said he thinks it's going to take a totalitarian eco regime to tackle some of these things, to force people to be sustainable. How else can you manage the world's resources with the way we have it right now? I don't know. I think it's a fairly good point.
Well, where do you want me to start? With AI?
Wherever you want to, buddy.
Well, I think AI can be a positive thing. I think
of course AI is a positive thing, but how is it going to... Okay, yeah, sorry.
China, as a planned economy, what makes them so much more successful than the Soviet Union? Because they're so far, they've lasted into this like technological future. China has the benefits of running a planned economy with, basically limitless technology, some of which is ahead of ours. And I see that as proof that these systems can be used for positive things. And an example under capitalism exists too. Walmart or Amazon. Look at Amazon's logistics system, which is primarily run on algorithms and artificial intelligence. Those systems exist. Now they exist to make a profit for Jeff Bezos or the Walton children or whatever, right? But those systems exist and they do operate very efficiently. I'll give them that. Now, the issue is they're privatized, but if you could make them more humane, better working conditions, less hours for people because of automation instead of more hours somehow, as it's worked out, the more robots have gotten involved and AI has gotten involved, the more people have had to work in this system. But if you integrated those things in a different way,
But then people wouldn't make the profits.
Yeah, exactly. You have to take that
Yeah.
away. There has to be a state to take it away.
By the way, I'm salivating looking at your cigarette. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, smoke your cigarette.
All right.
Smoke your cigarette. Light it up.
It keeps
No.
me
I
focused.
mean, the point. No, I would do anything to be smoking that cigarette right now.
But
Anything. Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree, like necessarily eco-authoritarian, but
No. I mean, that was like a
people's
conversation
government.
I had with my father.
Yeah.
It was basically I don't think my father meant totalitarian. I think he actually meant centralized decision making.
And that's going to be a huge part of it. If you like appropriated things like Amazon and, like I said, paid people fair wages, gave them health
Right.
care, gave them shorter hours, like that wouldn't be a hellish place to work.
No,
You
no,
just
that's
don't
what it should be.
write off Jeff Bezos out of the equation, right? He doesn't need to be there, and then all of a sudden there's money left to actually pay people fair wages and give them these benefits. Without Bezos, that's gone. That whole profit motive and like the board and the investors and all that shit, wipe it out. And that's what, there does need to be a government to do that. There does need to be a government that does stuff like China, where in key industries are, the state holds a 51% stake in these companies.
Okay.
And
All right. So you're saying like, and this is where I sometimes get confused. You're saying people can still make a profit in communism.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Temporarily, it goes away. Trust me, we're not letting it fly forever. But I do believe in I think one of the mistakes that Stalin made early on was rolling back the NEP, Lenin's new economic policy, which allowed for like farmers and smaller artisans to continue to like sell in a market economy.
So how do you think we're going to deal with these private economy people, property fascists? What they're not going to go away, dude.
No,
I mean, how are you going to integrate them into a communist system?
You said I'm going to integrate them. If they don't like it, they can go somewhere.
Yeah, you don't have that control yet. So
if I had the control to like nationalize Amazon.
Yeah, I don't want you to have that control yet. I don't want any one person to have control. I want people to figure out a way to work together, and I think it's possible.
I don't want.
I don't think it's. I don't want to work with white nationalists. Get them the fuck out. Get white nationalists the fuck out. But I think there is a role for people economically. I think there is a way for us to negotiate people who believe in private property and communism. I think there's a way. There's got to be a way.
Look, I think there's an argument to be made that if you start enacting these policies and they impact people's lives, you get more converts. There will always be holdouts no matter what you do.
That's what Obama said about his healthcare plan.
But healthcare plan was just forcing you to buy private insurance. Fuck that.
But that was the bare minimum. That was the bare minimum of fucking. Come on, dude.
But look at things. Okay. Yeah. That's garbage, though. Somebody's going to have to do something bigger.
Do you really think that socialism is going to happen anytime soon in America?
No, but as you argued yourself, you said maybe Medicare for all will.
Right.
So,
but I'm saying,
let me explain my point.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Let's start with like FDR and the New Deal. Incredibly popular. I mean, the only 4-term president, right? These social spending programs, and yes, part of it was the war later on, but it started with New Deal programs. LBJ, the same thing with like expanding Medicare and Medicaid and the Great Society and Social Security and everything like that. Those programs, even though they've been defunded and shot to shit by, austerity governments, those programs are still popular among the people who receive them. If you believe Medicare for all is a real possibility, the more benefits like that you give to people, and say you do abolish like billionaire owners of companies, and all of a sudden the people working at those companies, even reactionaries, have higher wages and less time at
Absolutely.
work.
Absolutely, we should
things,
liquidate these billionaire companies. Yeah.
As you enact these things, more people will be converted, because the more you give people, the more they understand that this is working for their benefit.
But
Right
what is that
now,
going to take right now?
it's going to take years and years more of fighting out, I guess, in elections, unless this shit collapses. I don't know. But I think the more you adopt, it's
So you
so hard to
admit that we
say.
need elections. I mean,
We're just stuck with them. I admit we're stuck
Right.
with them.
how else is it going to happen, dude? I don't see any other way.
Labor militancy.
Labor militancy? What do you mean? What does that mean?
I mean, okay, so during the last government shutdown, the government finally reopened in like a panic because flight attendants were threatening to go on strike and TSA workers weren't showing up to work. And they were shutting down like a major channel for commerce in this country. And that's valued above all else. Commercial flights, you can fuck off, you missed your flight and like, yeah, you're fucking $110 or whatever for your flight to like Albuquerque's mine. Fuck off, But as far as like actual commerce goes, all of the moment airports were threatened to be shut down, the federal government suddenly found a way to reopen. During Occupy out in California, when the port of Oakland was closed, that caused mass panics among capitalist class. These are the things that you need. I mean, it should be terrifying now that there's like places in the South where people are trying to unionize. That's a bad sign for the billionaire class. But labor can't be restricted by the old unions. There has to be militant labor that's willing to organize on their own, whether it be in the workplace or in the community in general, and actually strike at the heart of the infrastructure that capitalism relies on.
Okay, I totally agree with that. Yeah. I didn't know what you meant by militant labor. I honestly didn't.
It's just that the labor coalition, like AFL-CIO kind of type stuff, they're never going to promote anything like that. That's not there. And like the IWW is kind of an anarchist goof off organization, in my opinion. But when workplaces are organizing independently and stuff like that, that's a bad sign for the capitalist, because that's going against the wishes of the owners. Usually the unions don't even want to get involved unless they see, dues. But the fact that labor is going out on its own and striking out is a danger. Look at the teachers' unions in West Virginia, who weren't even allowed to strike, and they had no collective bargaining left. The school board literally tried to make them wear like Fitbits to monitor their physical activity. And even though they had no collective bargaining and they weren't technically allowed to strike, they went out, and that was a red.
Speaking of running, talk about Fitbits.
Well, this was the crazy thing, that this governor, they were trying to think of ways to reduce the healthcare costs. So the first idea was, well, let's charge the teachers more for their healthcare, like let's double what they've got to contribute, and then let's make them wear Fitbits, where they'd have to buy their own Fitbits, and the Fitbit would send how many steps they're taking and what physical activity they're doing.
This is a little watch, like a bracelet.
Yeah, it's like a little bracelet, but it records what you're doing, and in this case, in West Virginia, it would send to a central computer at the Board of Education just how active you were being.
Even last summer in Kentucky, the coal miners who were blocking the railroad tracks because they weren't being paid.
I'd say after tonight, even if we do get to go back to work, I ain't going to be able to because I'm out here.
It's around anywhere from $24,000 to $3,000, and some of these men, they owe more than that.
So yeah, I think that it's the labor militancy that is gonna really scare capital. And then on top of that, I think, like I said, as you scare capital and put pressure on them, the more humane working conditions are made, the more policies that benefit everyone in this country, even people I don't like, like Medicare for all. There's people I personally don't like, but I don't care if they get Medicare for all. If you have those types of things and people see the benefits from them, I feel more people will integrate into something resembling at least a social democratic society, at least on par with Europe. That's the best we could do in the next like 15 years, probably.
Right. Well, then we're on the same page, man. That's what I think. Yeah.
I think as you progress towards my ideal system, there will be more people brought in, but there will always be forces that will not want to be integrated. I mean, even like Jeff Bezos, he's going to lobby the hell out of any legislation that might cut down on his wealth. Imagine you go to the next step where, you're about to take the wealth. What does he do? We don't know, and I think there will be people who will defend capital, even small, like petite bourgeoisie, small business owners, like those types of people who will defend capital over just a life of dignity because they have to have
because
they're accumulators.
They don't think that money is going to be repossessed for anything good. That's the problem with our modern government, is that people don't view taxation as benefiting anything other than the military industrial complex.
And that's why
so until we can do anything different from that, yes, there's absolutely not going to be any private buy-in to wealth accumulation by the state from private enterprise. It's simply not going to happen.
That's why it's going to take under this, like I said, militant labor. And then also you're going to you will have to organize people to vote, unfortunately. That's just the reality of it. You'll have to organize people around these issues, because that's the only way you're going to, you have to build up enough force to take these things on. And that's the importance also of like our version of democracy sucks, between gerrymandering, voter suppression, and just the electoral college and all this shit. Our whole system is like, if you try and explain it to somebody from another country, it sucks.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you're not willing to just imprison and re-educate conservatives, because I don't
quite yet.
Yeah, well, but that's what you were essentially arguing in our interview with one of our previous guests. I can't remember which, but you were essentially arguing that a militant re-education of dissidents is warranted.
Now, when you get to the point where you have a legitimate workers' democracy or something resembling that, and you have these social programs, and you have an end to like wealth hoarders, those who refuse to give in, those who still hold out, and maybe, they're these private mercs, or maybe they're just people who really love the idea of capitalism because they're so brainwashed by it, they'll still exist. And people who want to destroy your project, I don't. Well, I think they should exist. I think they should just go away for a while and figure it out.
I think they'll be naturally. I think if the system works well enough, they'll be naturally phased out into oblivion.
There will always be some of them, and especially
it won't. If the system works well enough, it won't matter.
Yeah.
Until the system works well enough, if people are producing things that are better, that actually help people, it's never going to work. And you cannot. I do not agree ever with any kind of totalitarian thing, which is
There
why I just don't agree with forcing people to do something.
There will be people who hold on to ethnic identities, religious identities.
Well, let me
these-
restate that. You should have to wear a mask. Wear a mask, you fucking dumbass
but
bitches.
listen to me, like
Yeah.
an actual literal fascist, no matter how good you make his life, no matter how much health care you give him,
Right.
he's still living in a diverse society. He's not happy. He lives in a multicultural country. I'm
Right.
sorry.
He
There's
still
an
feels
element-
oppressed.
There's
Yeah.
an element that needs to be removed because all he's going to do in society is try to sabotage it.
Well,
I'm not saying
okay,
kill
so
him,
no,
and
no,
I'm not
here,
saying anything
no,
like
no,
that.
and that's a very good point. Here's my argument to that. I think only time is going to flush that kind of mentality out of the bloodline. And I think in the meantime, if you weaponize that, if you punish that, it creates a weaponized blowback against it. And so you end up creating more of them. The more you punish one person who goes down, he goes down screaming to his friends, and you create more of them. I think that's what ends up happening.
I'd argue differently. I'd say that if you can look at the examples of Ukraine, where the fascist nationalist movement, the Nazi collaborators and the Banderites were put down during the Soviet Union, but then suddenly reappeared as these color revolutions happened. And then you have places like, you had Ukraine, and then you had Poland, which is now a right-wing reactionary government after the fall of the Soviet Union, a complete like borderline fascist state. East Germany is the base of the AfD, which is the far right party in Germany. Under the socialist East Germany, these people were guaranteed healthcare, they were guaranteed education through every level, they were guaranteed housing and everything like that. But people were still monitored by the police, the Stasi, who, I know that's like saying, God's real name or something like that when you bring them up. But people were still monitored for their counter-revolutionary activities, and there were still elements, especially, coming from the outside or influenced by the outside, by the Western nations. There were elements inside these places that were trying to destroy them, or people still attached to things like the Nazi ideology, especially in the case of East Germany. Now, when the Soviet Union went away, all of a sudden, there's a right-wing party with a massive base in East Germany. They have never really fully integrated back into the country. They don't have the guaranteed job security they had under the, the socialist East Germany. Those things are gone. And I think that's, like I said earlier, that's the danger of the right wing picking them up. But even with all of those things, there were still elements in that society who held on to things like nationalism, and they have survived and they have reemerged. They go underground, but those ideologies carry on for a long time, and they carry on through generations. And there will be generations of children now who believe that most of the government is full of demonic pedophiles. These things carry on, and at some point, in my opinion, you have to remove some things. I think we can probably wrap there, but I think that gives you the gist of my opinion.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an argument that I think I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to revisit that one, because I think you're making a solid argument, and I actually might agree with you.
Trust me, man, I know it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, but I might agree with you at this point, because of groups like QAnon and their ultimate sell, which is basically like they've shown what they want to do.
Think men like these are afraid of an uneducated 125-pound punk like you that's never won a fair fight in your life and holds your gun sideways? Young man, I'll meet you on solid ground anytime, anywhere, light or heavy. Makes no difference to me. You won't walk away. Look at you. Men like us, son, we do dumbbell presses with weights bigger than you. And the convicts in jail, most of those men are good people who just found themselves crossed with the law. They're not evil, and they don't respect you or any punk like you. They'll toss you around like a rag doll. I encourage every citizen watching this to look into your own heart and find the American courage that conquers all evil. I implore you to listen to this message and stand up. Take back your streets. Take back your country. Come forward with information about these heathens that have terrorized your community. And for those who would use this message as a way to create false racial division in our country, take a close look behind me. Standing next to every cop is a leader of our black community. This is not about race. It's about right versus wrong. One last message to the gremlins. You don't like the things I've told you tonight? I got one thing to say. I'm easy to find. On behalf of the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office, the Louisiana State Police, the U.S. Marshals, and every cop and law-abiding citizen from sea to shining sea, I'm Captain Clay Higgins, asking every patriot to stand up, share this video, and send a clear message to the world. We're Americans. We'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees.
They're a cult, but they've shown what they want to do with power. Right. They've shown that they would be a fascist. They would execute people.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
they would love to they'd take you. You live in
they would be the
you're a leftist. You're anti.
They would be the worst case example of what of you just presented I think a comprehensive argument for how to deal with dissension. What the QAnon people are essentially arguing is that you should be immediately rounded up into Gitmo and executed.
My argument is they're going to do something to us if we let them stay.
Right.
That it boils down to that. If we let them stay,
it's honestly and
they fantasize.
It's a great place to end this conversation because I don't have an answer to that right now because I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong.
You should think on it because just remember they fantasize about what they'll do to us.
Oh no.
That's how they spend their time.
They've shown what they want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I believe what I believe and I think what I think is necessary. And I don't think all of the examples in the past are perfect and I won't defend every single thing.
Sure.
But I will say that there is some necessity behind the things that I believe, in my opinion. So yeah, man, this was a great chat.
Well said, buddy. Yeah, good talking to you, man. And
absolutely. And we'll make more videos like this. And obviously, anybody who's watching, make sure to go subscribe to the Left is Dead podcast. And we will have an episode out shortly here, in the next couple days, hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll talk
if you've listened this far, thank you.
If you made it, you're a champion.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And God bless you, even though I don't believe in God, but whatever. God bless you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You have called for self-defense units, rifle clubs, ready to execute on the spot those who threaten Negroes.
I don't think that I said that.
Yes, you did.
No, I don't think I said that.
All right.
I have called for rifle clubs that I think Negroes should, in areas where the police, whether it be federal, state, or city, have proven their inability or their unwillingness to defend Negroes, the lives and the property of Negroes, then it's only intelligent and it's only right that Negroes protect themselves, and I have encouraged them to buy a rifle and a shotgun, which according to the Constitution is legal.
For what purpose?
Not buy a pistol or something like that, but a rifle or a shotgun, which is constitutionally legal.
For what purpose?
So that at any time, anyone makes any effort whatsoever to brutalize them or attack them or endanger them, they should have something to defend themselves. And in a country that spends, I think, $50 billion a year for defense alone, I'm shocked that there's apprehension over Negroes trying to do something to defend them.